At 11:46 on Tuesday morning, when I was not on the ferry, not wearing my vest, not sitting in front of the sounder, and not even scheduled to work that route anymore, my right hand wrote the word contact in my grocery notebook. I was standing in my kitchen in Bergen when it happened. The kettle had just clicked off behind me. I had not switched it on. The radio on the counter was off. The window was fogged from the heat in the flat. Outside, the harbor was gray and flat, under the kind of low November sky that makes everything look closer than it is. I remember all of that because I was trying very hard to notice ordinary things. The cup beside the sink, the spoon on the counter, the small crack in the blue tile above the stove, the radiator ticking under the window. Then my phone rang. The display said Knut Mehus. Knut is my supervisor at the Vestland Coastal Hydrography Office. He is not a man who calls during a survey unless something has gone wrong, and by then, something had been going wrong for 6 weeks. I answered without speaking. For a moment I heard only wind, engine vibration, and the hollow cabin noise of the MF Osterfjord moving across the fjord. Then Knut said, "Ingrid, are you alone?" I looked at the pencil in my hand. I looked at the notebook on the kitchen table. At the top of the open page, in my own handwriting, was the timestamp 11:46. Beneath it, I had written contact. Beneath that, I had written 162 meters. Beneath that, 18 meters. Then my initials. Then the small horizontal line I always drew when a witness column entry was complete. I said, "Why are you calling me?" Knut did not answer immediately. In the background, I heard someone else speaking. A woman. Meta, I think. She sounded frightened in the controlled way. Professionals sound frightened when other people are listening. Knut came back on the line and said, "The new hydrographer just logged a contact." I closed my eyes. He said, "Same time, same depth, same length." I said, "Was it on the screen?" Another pause. "No," Knut said. "That's why I'm calling." I looked down at the notebook again. My hand was still holding the pencil. The lead point was touching the paper, resting at the end of the line. Waiting. Knut said, "Ingrid, the screen was clean. The digital file was clean. The new unit shows nothing in the water column, but the witness column has an entry." I did not ask whose handwriting it was. I already knew. Before I tell you what happened after that, I need to explain what my job was, because this is not a story about a ghost ship, not in the way people like that phrase. It is a story about a system that was built to verify the bottom of a fjord, and what happened when it began verifying something that was not in the fjord at all. My name is Ingrid Solli. I am 34 years old, and since the spring of 2019, I have worked for the Vestland Coastal Hydrography Office. My job is not dramatic. I do not dive. I do not chase storms. I do not discover wrecks with treasure in them. Most days I sit on ferries, workboats, or harbor launches with a yellow-cased laptop strapped to something solid, and I watch a line crawl across a screen. That line is the bottom. The machine sends sound into the water. The sound strikes something. The sound comes back. The machine turns the return into a trace. Most of the time, the trace is exactly what it should be. Mud, rock, slope, trough, silt, a clean rising bottom near shore, a deeper channel in the middle. The work teaches you to trust what returns. That is important. The route in question runs between Florvåg and Knarvik, across one of the narrow throats of the Osterfjord. The harbor authority pays our office to ride the morning passenger ferry 3 times a week and take continuous depth soundings along a fixed transect. The older charts in that section are not wrong enough to be dangerous every day, but they are wrong enough to matter. The ferries are bigger now. The traffic is heavier. The bottom drops sharply on the Florvåg side, levels into a trough a little over 200 meters down, then rises toward Knarvik. We call that kind of job a maintenance survey. It means nothing is expected to happen. The kit fits in 2 hard cases. The transducer mounts on a welded bracket on the starboard rail, just forward of the wheelhouse. The ferry company put the bracket there years before I started, because hydrographers had been attaching temporary clamps to their railings for 4 decades, and ferry crews dislike improvised equipment almost as much as surveyors do. The processing unit is a rugged laptop in a yellow shell. I lock it to a bench inside the passenger cabin. The screen faces me. My witness pad sits to the right, pencil above it, thermos beyond that, handheld radio clipped to my vest. I wore the vest for the whole crossing because the crew liked non-passengers to be visible. I drank coffee from a thermos because Norwegian ferry coffee tastes like boiled rope, and because Captain Vebjørn's wife would refill my thermos on the second leg of the morning if I had remembered to say good morning properly on the first. That is the kind of work it was. Visible, repeated, boring enough to become a habit. There were 6 procedures for the Florvåg-Narvik route, and I am going to tell you about them because procedures are the bones of this account. Without them, what happened sounds like a superstition. Inside them, it becomes something worse. The first procedure was calibration. Before departure from the south berth at Florvåg, I lowered an orange aluminium calibration plate beneath the transducer on a graduated line. The plate had a hole in the middle and the initials EHB scratched into the rim. EHB belonged to the hydrographer who had held the route before me. I never met her. She retired before I was assigned there. Her handwriting remained on the old calibration card, small and exact, the handwriting of someone who wanted numbers to behave. If the sounder did not return the plate depth within 2 centimeters, I adjusted the sound velocity setting until it did. It almost always did. The second procedure was the witness column. The sounder recorded everything automatically, but I also kept a manual paper log, timestamp, waypoint, depth, occasional note. The office called it the human witness column. It existed because years earlier a corrupted memory card had erased a month of survey data, and no one had remembered enough to reconstruct the route. Since then, there had to be a person writing beside the machine. A person is harder to corrupt, Knut once joked. He does not joke about that now. The third procedure was the lateral check. Twice during each crossing, the unit swept a wider band of the fjord, recording not just the bottom directly beneath the ferry, but about 30 meters on either side. The ferry did not always cross on the exact same line. Skippers steer for traffic, weather, floating debris, impatient fishing boats. The lateral swath gave the office a wider verification. The unit ran that check automatically. I only had to be present. The fourth procedure was the wake pause. At each end of the crossing, when the ferry reversed, propeller wash rolled past the transducer and filled the return with bubbles. The unit flagged it and excluded the data. I wrote wake in the witness column, drew a line through the bad rows, and resumed when the trace cleaned. It was the one procedure where I formally marked absence. The fifth procedure was the contact protocol. If the trace showed a hard return between the surface and the bottom, something suspended in the water column, neither seabed nor floating surface noise, I had to do 3 things. First, write contact in the witness column with the timestamp. Second, call the wheelhouse and report depth, bearing, and apparent size. Third, photograph the screen with the unit's built-in camera. This protocol exists because of a submerged shipping container near Tromsø in 2003. A hydrographer saw the shadow, failed to report it properly, and 2 days later, a small boat struck it and sank. Since then, we report everything. The contact protocol assumes the contact is a real object in real water. It has no branch for anything else. The 6th procedure was close out. At the end of the day, I sat in the small room the ferry company let us use on the Narvik pier, connected the unit to the office network, transmitted the day's file to Bergen, scanned the witness column, and signed the summary. Until I signed, the day was still open. After I signed, the day belonged to the file. That was the system I trusted. On the 11th of September, the system returned something it should not have returned. It was the second crossing of the day. Clear weather, flat water, good calibration, clean bottom trace. We were almost exactly over the trough, where the depth held around 208 meters. At 11:46, the screen produced a hard mid-water return, 162 meters down, 18 meters long, directly beneath the ferry. It held for 7 seconds, which is roughly how long it takes the Osterfjord to pass over an object of that length at crossing speed. The return was clean and bright. It had a hard upper edge, a hard lower edge, and a flat profile that answered the ping like metal. I wrote contact in the witness column. I wrote 11:46. I wrote 162 meters. I wrote 18 meters. Then I called the wheelhouse. Wheelhouse Solly Hydro. Contact at 162 beneath us now, about 18 meters long, holding depth. Captain Vebjörn answered immediately. Nothing on mine. I looked at the screen. The return was still there. I said, "It's a clean return. I have it on the screen." "I have nothing," he said. There was a pause. The ferry's engine vibration came through the bench under my left arm. A child somewhere behind me was laughing at something on a phone. Then Vebjörn said, "Photograph it. Log it. We'll send the harbor a note. Probably a thermocline ghost." A thermocline ghost is a real thing. A temperature layer can throw back a soft echo that looks, briefly, like a contact. This was not that. A thermocline ghost has blurred edges. It wavers. It does not sit like a ruler laid across the water column. It does not return sound like metal. But the captain had no contact on his sonar, and I had no reason to turn one clean return into a drama. So I photographed the screen. I logged it. At closeout, I wrote possible thermocline artifact in the summary. Then I signed. The second contact came on the 14th. Same time, same section of the transect, same depth, same length. Captain Vebjörn was off that morning, and the second skipper, Lars Tonesen, answered the wheelhouse radio. "Nothing on ours," he said. "Send the photograph, Ingrid. We'll have harbor look." I sent it. At the end of the day, the harbor authority replied that they had no record of any obstruction at that depth on the transect, and asked me to remain alert for a third occurrence. The word they used was anomaly. I wrote it in the summary. I signed. I will be honest. At that point, I was curious, not frightened. Hydrographers live for recurrent observations. A single contact is debris. Two contacts in the same place become a question. A question becomes work. That evening, in my flat in Bergen, I pulled the traces from the 11th and the 14th onto my laptop and overlaid them. The contacts were not just at the same depth. They were not just the same length. They occupied the same horizontal position on the transect, within about 4 meters. Whatever had returned the ping on the 11th had returned it from the same place on the 14th. I made tea. I opened the old chart. I checked the wreck database. Nothing. No registered vessel. No obstruction. No lost structure. No known debris. The third contact came on the 16th. That was a Wednesday, not a normal survey day. We were making up a missed Tuesday crossing, and because of the ferry schedule, we reached the trough at 11:46 on the third crossing instead of the second. The contact appeared anyway. Same depth, same length, same position. That was when I understood the pattern was not by crossing number. It was by clock time. The ferry could be northbound or southbound, first survey window or makeup crossing. The contact did not care. At 11:46, if the ferry was over that part of the trough, the sounder showed it to me. I reported the third contact. Vebjörn listened, then sighed in the gentle way skippers sigh when office people make them document things they already believe they understand. Still nothing on ours, he said. Same ghost? Same return. Send it in. Harbor reviewed it and sent an instruction that I was to continue logging the contact, but stop calling the wheelhouse unless the size, depth, or behavior changed. It was reasonable. No one wants the same artifact called into the wheelhouse 3 times a week. So after that, I stopped calling. That was the first small surrender. The 3rd week passed quietly. The ferry ran. The calibration plate returned clean. The lateral checks ran on schedule. The wake pauses came and went. The bottom behaved. And at 11:46, when the ferry crossed the trough, the screen showed me an 18-meter contact at 162 meters. I wrote it down. I photographed it. I signed the day. There is a kind of danger that arrives wearing repetition as a disguise. You stop asking why it is there. You start making room for it. On the 23rd of September, the contact changed. Until then, the return had been a flat slab. That was the private word I used in my notebook. Slab. On the 23rd, the slab had a rise at one end. Not much. About 1 meter tall and 3 meters along. A low bump on the upper surface. The witness column had no field for shape. The protocol wanted depth, bearing, apparent size. It did not ask whether the thing at 162 meters had begun to develop structure. So I wrote contact. I wrote 162. I wrote 18. I photographed the screen. I signed. On the 25th, the rise was taller. On the 28th, it was the height and width of a small wheelhouse. That was the comparison that came to me before I could stop it. Wheelhouse. I did not write that word in the official column. I wrote it only in my private notebook, then stared at it until the letters looked childish. That morning, something else happened. At 11:46, as we approached the trough, I put my pencil to the witness pad. I wrote C, then O, then N, then I stopped. The screen had not produced the contact yet. I had begun writing contact 3 seconds early. I remember the exact sensation of realizing it. Not fear, but embarrassment. The sharp professional shame of catching yourself recording expectation instead of observation. Then the screen flashed. The slab appeared. The rise appeared. The shape looked exactly as I had expected. I finished the word. I wrote the depth. I wrote the length. I initialed. I did not strike the entry through. I did not annotate it. I did not report it. That was the second small surrender. I told myself the contact had become routine enough that my hand had simply anticipated the task. That explanation comforted me because it sounded ordinary. On the 2nd of October, Canute sent a second hydrographer. Her name was Metaline. She was 2 years senior to me and better than I was at pretending not to be concerned. She arrived at Florvåg with another sounder, another screen, another transducer, another witness pad. The ferry crew mounted her unit on the port rail, roughly 12 meters from mine. We calibrated both units against the same orange plate. Both returned correctly. The sea was flat. The sky was overcast. The cabin was half full of commuters. Mette stood beside me, with her screen balanced on a portable stand, one hand on the rail, one hand resting on her own pad. At 11:45, neither of us spoke. At 11:46, the contact appeared on my screen. The slab, the raised structure, the low rail, 2 small projections on top, like short masts. I said, "Mette, what are you seeing?" She looked at her screen. Bottom at 2:08, clean trace, no midwater contact. I have a hard return at 162. On your unit? Yes. She stepped beside me. I turned my screen toward her. The contact was there. She frowned. "Ingrid," she said, "the trace is clean." I looked at the screen. The vessel shape was bright in the water column. I said, "You don't see that?" She leaned closer. Her face was maybe 20 centimeters from the display. "Ingrid, I see the bottom. That's all. The ferry engine vibrated through the floor. A passenger unwrapped something from foil. Somewhere outside, a gull cried once over the water. Meta straightened slowly. Swap units, she said. We swapped at the Narvik turnaround. My unit went to the port rail. Hers went to the starboard rail. We recalibrated. We crossed again outside the survey window and saw nothing because it was not 11:46. 2 days later, on the 4th of October, we tried again. This time I sat at Met's unit on the starboard rail. Met sat at mine on the port rail. At 11:46, the contact appeared on the screen in front of me. Met's unit, starboard rail, same depth, same length. The two short masts were clearer now. I looked across the bench. Metz was staring at my unit. I don't have it, she said. I do. On mine? Yes. Show me. I turned the screen toward her. She looked directly at the display. The contact was on it. She said, very quietly, Ingrid, that screen is clean. That was the moment curiosity left. Not because the machine was showing something impossible, because it was showing it only to me. Mette took both units back to Bergen for service. The lab tested them against 3 other sounders and a reference target in the harbor tank. Both units behaved normally. The digital files from the 2nd and 4th of October were retrieved and examined. The recorded trace was clean. No contact, no slab, no vessel, no masts. The digital file showed the bottom at 208 meters and nothing above it. The photographs I had taken of the screen showed the contact. The witness column showed my entries. The machine's memory said I had seen nothing. The screen photographs said I had seen something. The paper said I had done my job. On the 7th of October, Knut called me into the office. He had arranged the photographs in date order across the meeting room table. Beside each one, he had placed a printout of the corresponding digital trace. Photograph, contact, file, clean bottom, photograph, contact, file, clean bottom, photograph, contact with rise, file, clean bottom, photograph, contact with deckhouse and masts, file, clean bottom. Knut stood at the end of the table with his arms folded. He was kind, which made it worse. The old Norbit displays have a small class of LCD faults, he said. Persistent shape artifacts, screen level only, not written to the underlying file. Met saw a clean screen, I said. Knut nodded. Yes. I saw the contact on her unit. Yes. The unit did not record it. No. But the photograph did. Knut looked down at the photograph nearest his hand. The photograph records the screen state at the moment the camera fires. Met was looking at that same screen. He did not answer. Knut, I said. She was standing beside me. I know. She did not see what I saw. He looked tired then. More tired than a display fault required. He said, that is why we are retiring the unit and reconciling the witness column. I laughed once. I did not mean to. Which unit? He did not like that. The route unit, he said. Your assigned unit. The contact followed me to Met's unit. Ingrid. He used my name the way supervisors use names when they want to bring a conversation back inside a room. Ingrid, we have clean files. We have one witness reporting an artifact. We have another witness reporting no contact. We have no corroboration from the wheelhouse. No harbor sonar, no lateral swath return, no recorded object. The only responsible classification is display artifact. And the photographs? They will be retained but not relied upon. And my witness column will amend the contact entries retroactively, from contact to artifact. Yes. And I initial those amendments. Yes. The signature is the act that closes the record. I thought of that sentence while Knut was speaking. Until I sign, the day is still open. After I sign, the day belongs to the file. Knut said, take Friday off Come back Monday. We'll sit down with Brita and Harbor and close it cleanly. Close it cleanly. That phrase stayed with me. I took Friday off. I sat at my kitchen table and laid the photographs in order. The first image was just a slab. The next was the same slab. The third was the same. Then, on the 23rd, the rise. On the 25th, taller. On the 28th, a deck house. On the 2nd of October, a rail. On the 4th, 2 masts. I had been thinking of it as a contact changing shape. At the kitchen table, I understood it differently. It was resolving, like a photograph developing, like something coming into focus through bad reception. The sounder had not been drawing a thing moving through the water. It had been drawing a vessel arriving. I picked up the photograph from the 4th of October and held it under the kitchen lamp. The masts were barely more than 2 dark ticks on the bright return. Behind the deck house, there was another mark. Small, 1 pixel wide, maybe 2 pixels tall. A dark vertical mark on the rendered deck. It was not present in the photograph from the 2nd of October. It was not present on the 28th. It was present on the 4th. In the scale of the vessel, it was about the size of a person. I put the photograph down. Then I stood. I went to the bathroom mirror. I do not know why. I looked at myself for a long time. My face was pale, ordinary, tired. The face of a woman who had slept badly, but not badly enough to call in sick. I remember noticing that my hair was tucked behind one ear and not the other. I went back to the kitchen. The mark on the photograph seemed turned the same way I had been turned in the mirror. That is not a proper observation. I know that. A mark that small has no face, no front, no back, no shoulders, no head. But a professional impression can arrive before reason corrects it. And my impression, before reason corrected it, was that the figure had copied my orientation. I called Canute the next morning. Canute, I said, do you have the 4th of October photograph in front of you? I do. What do you see? A sonar return. Describe it. Ingrid, please. He sighed. An elongated hard return. 18 meters. A raised structure at one end. 2 projections above that. Is there anything on the deck? There was silence. On the deck of what? Of the shape. The return resembles a vessel, he said carefully. It is not a vessel. Is there a dark mark aft of the raised structure? No. You're looking at the photograph now? Yes. And there's no mark? No. I thanked him and hung up. The mark was still on my copy. That was when I began listing the other things. The early contact on the 28th. The thermos on the wrong side of the unit on the 2nd of October. The fact that when Meta and I swapped units, I had taken my witness pad with me to her side of the deck and written in my own column while sitting at her machine. The lateral check on the 2nd of October, which should have run at 11:50 but had shifted itself to 11:47, just close enough to verify that nothing was present after the contact. The wake-pause discrepancy on the 4th, 1 minute off in a direction that did not match my normal error pattern. The kettle switching itself on, the kitchen window, the missing time, the pencil in my hand before I knew I had picked it up. By Saturday afternoon, I had 6 observations written in my private notebook. Then, without intending to, I wrote a 7th, 11:46. Contact, 162 meters, 18 meters. My initials, the closing line. There was no survey, no ferry, no screen, no transducer in the water, no route beneath me except the distance between the kitchen table and the window. But my hand had produced a valid witness column entry. That was when I understood the worst part. The contact did not require the instrument anymore. It required the witness. I went to the reconciliation meeting on Monday. Canute was there. So was Britta Skog from Records, and a representative from the Harbor Authority, whose name I will not write, because he was only doing his job, and he looked uncomfortable from the moment I entered the room. The amended witness columns were printed and clipped in order. September 11th, September 14th, September 16th, September 17th, September 23rd, September 25th, September 28th, October 2nd, October 4th. Each line where I had written contact had been marked for revision. Contact was to become artifact. My initials would confirm the change. Brita explained the process. She had a precise voice and a red pen. "This does not accuse you of error," she said. "It reconciles the observed display event against the clean digital trace." "Against the file," I said. "Yes. The file says nothing was there. The file says no contact was recorded. And the witness column says I saw one. The witness column says you observed a display condition. That condition has now been classified." She slid the first sheet toward me. I held the pen. The room was too warm. The radiator clicked under the window. Somewhere beyond the wall, a printer started and stopped. I initialed the First Amendment. September 11th. Contact became artifact. Nothing happened. I initialed the second. September 14th. Nothing happened. I initialed the third. September 16th. On the Fourth Amendment, Brita's phone buzzed. She ignored it. On the 5th, Knut's phone buzzed too. He looked at it. His face changed. I stopped writing. The harbor representative's phone buzzed next. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Knut stood slowly. I said, "Is it 11:46? He looked at the clock on the wall. It was. He answered the call on speaker. The sound that came through was ferry cabin noise. Wind. Engine vibration. A woman breathing too close to a phone. It was Meta. She said, "Knut, we have a problem." Knut closed his eyes. "The new unit? The new unit is clean." "Then what?" "The witness column," Brita whispered. "No," Meta said. "The new hydrographer did not write it." Knut looked at me. Meta continued. "She was standing at the wheelhouse door when it happened. We all saw the pad on the bench. The pencil moved. No one in the meeting room breathed properly after that." Knut said, "Read the entry." Meta's voice dropped. 11:46. Contact. 162 meters. 18 meters. Then she stopped. Knut said, "Meta? There are initials." "Whose?" She did not answer. I looked down at the amendment page in front of me. My pen was still touching the paper. Without meaning to, I had drawn a small horizontal line beneath the amendment I had not yet initialed. The same line I drew when a contact entry was complete. Mette said, "They're Ingrid's." Brita pushed her chair back so hard it struck the wall. The harbor representative swore under his breath. Knut took the phone off speaker and walked to the window. He spoke quietly, but the room was small, and I heard enough. "Stop the survey. Photograph everything. Do not touch the pad. No, do not remove the page. No, do not let anyone write over it." When he ended the call, he did not turn around immediately. Brita said, "This meeting is adjourned." "No," I said. My voice surprised me. Everyone looked at me. I said, "No, it is open." Knut turned from the window. "What?" "The day is open," I said. I tapped the paper in front of me. "Until I sign, the day is still open," Brita said. "Ingrid, this is not—" "The file tried to close it," I said. "We tried to close it. That's what it wanted." Knut's face was very still. I do not know whether he believed me. I only know that he was no longer treating me like an employee who had seen a display fault. I said, "It needed the contact entries amended. It needed the witness column changed from contact to artifact." "Why?" the harbor representative asked. I looked at the stack of papers. "Because if the witness says it was never there, then it can arrive without contradiction." No one spoke. It sounded absurd when said aloud. It also sounded procedural. That was the terrible thing. Brita sat down slowly. "What do you suggest?" I looked at the phone in Knut's hand. "Call the ferry. Tell them to keep the witness column open. Canute did. Meta answered on the first ring. Do not close the entry, he said. Do not draw a line under it. Do not initial it. Leave it unfinished. Met said something I could not hear. Canute looked at me. She says the line is already drawn. My stomach went cold. By the pencil? I asked. He repeated the question, then listened, then lowered the phone. She says no. Then who drew it? His answer was quiet. The new hydrographer did. I sat down. Canute said, she doesn't remember doing it. The meeting did not continue after that. There are official versions of what happened next, and I am sure they are cleaner than this one. The route was suspended for 48 hours for equipment review. The new unit was removed. The witness pad was sealed. My assigned unit remained retired. The Harbor Authority issued a temporary note about survey reconciliation and instrumentation review. No hazard to navigation was identified. That is the language they used. No hazard to navigation. By Wednesday, Canute had moved me to the Sognefjord transect. A longer route, different ferry, different bottom, different office schedule. He told me it was a kindness. I think he meant it. On my first morning there, I arrived early. I calibrated against a new plate. No initials scratched into the rim. New bracket, new crew, new cabin, new screen. The bottom dropped much deeper than the Osterfjord, then rolled in long, uneven folds under the ferry. At 11:30, I told myself nothing would happen. At 11:40, I stopped pretending. At 11:45, I put both hands flat on the bench and kept them away from the pencil. The screen was clean. The bottom trace moved steadily. No slab, no rise, no masts. At 11:46, the unit did not show a contact. For 7 seconds, nothing appeared in the water column. I remember almost crying from relief. Then the printer beside the unit woke up. We do not use the printer during active crossing. It is there for closeout summaries and emergency hard copies. It should not have been connected to the sounder's live feed. It printed one narrow strip of paper. I did not touch it until the ferry reached the next waypoint. The strip showed a single line of text. 11:46. Contact. 162 meters, 18 meters. No bearing. No vessel profile. No screen capture. Just the witness entry. And beneath it, where my initials should have been, there was a word. Not my name, not EHB, not Medes, not the new hydrographers. Witness. I looked at the screen. The bottom was clean. I looked out through the ferry window at the gray water of the Sognefjord. The fjord was wide and ordinary and empty. Then, without looking down, I felt my right hand move toward the pencil. I put my left hand over it and held it there. The pencil rolled once against my knuckles, stopped, rolled again. At the wheelhouse door, the skipper called back, "Everything all right, Hydro?" I looked at the clean screen. I looked at the printed strip. I looked at my hand trapped under my other hand. Then the sounder made a tone I had never heard before. Not an alarm, not a contact flag, a confirmation tone. On the screen, below the clean bottom trace, a new line appeared in the system log. Witness present. I am writing this now, on lined A4 paper, at the desk in my flat in Bergen. The lamp is on. The radiator is clicking. The kettle has clicked off twice since I began, and I remember switching it on only once. Canute has asked me to clarify what I logged on the Florvåg Knarvik transect across September and October. I will give him this account. He will read it. Britta will turn it into something tidier. The Harbor Authority will ask whether there is an obstruction at 162 meters in the trough. There is not. I need that understood. There is no vessel in the Osterfjord. There is no wreck on the chart. There is no hard midwater object. No hazard to navigation. No sonar contact for the wheelhouse to avoid. The thing at 162 meters is not in the water. It is in the act of recording. It began on the screen, because the screen was where I watched. Then it moved to the photograph, because the photograph was where I verified. Then it moved to the witness column, because the column was where I made it official. Then it moved to my hand, because my hand was the part of the system that could not be retired. At 11:46 tomorrow, I am not scheduled to work. I have placed every pencil in the flat inside a tin box and taped the box shut. I have unplugged the kettle. I have closed the notebook. I have put my witness pads in the hallway cupboard under 2 winter coats. These are not procedures. They are gestures. There is a difference. A procedure is something the office recognizes. A gesture is something a person does when she has no procedure left. The radiator is clicking. The harbor outside my window is gray. The taped tin box is on the kitchen table. I can hear something inside it moving. I am going to stop writing now, because the line is not drawn yet, and I am trying, with both hands, not to draw it.